Coming up on the South Air Report, 7 days of war, 1,300 people dead in Iran. Airports struck and data centers on fire, as well as cities being hit. We take stock of a conflict that is growing faster than the world can keep up with. This war is not just being fought in the sky. Iranian drones have knocked out banking apps across the UAE, and Qatar's gas plants are shut. Spending energy and sending those prices soaring across Europe. Also on the show, we've got Nepal counting its votes, and the old guard is paying the price. The rapper who led a revolution may be on the verge of leading a nation. I'm Leticia Castro, and you're watching South Air Network. Thank you for joining us 7 days in, and the scale of the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran is becoming impossible to ignore. Of course, at least 1,300 are dead. This is a report that we have thousands of its Islamic Revolutionary Guard have been killed or wounded. Overnight, explosions rocked residential areas near Tehran University, and Iran's foreign minister says there is no reason to negotiate and told an American journalist his country was ready for a ground invasion by the U.S. in the Gulf. Iranian drones directly struck 2 Amazon Web Services data centers in the UAE, knocking out banking apps, payment platforms, and digital services across the country. Now, Qatar has shut down its LNG plants after Iranian strikes, sending European gas prices nearly doubling overnight. And of course, in Lebanon, Israel has killed at least 120 people and issued a blanket evacuation of over 500,000 residents of the southern suburbs of Beirut. 80,000 people as of now are reportedly displaced. Sahil Mengani has more.
Missiles in the air, airstrikes on the ground, and across the Middle East, civilians are paying the price. As the war between Israel, the United States, and Iran deepens, families across the region are packing up whatever they can and leaving. Iran was already home to 1.65 million refugees, mostly from Afghanistan, even before the war began. Now, local estimates suggest close to 100,000 people fled Tehran in just the first 2 days after strikes. More recent statistics are unavailable as widespread internet blackouts and restricted access to information have cut the country off from the outside world. In Lebanon, Israeli strikes have already forced over 84,000 people into shelters across nearly 400 government sites. But those figures came before Israel's blanket evacuation order for Beirut's southern suburbs, home to tens of thousands. Many are now on foot with nowhere to go. And it's not just people on the move. Many of those displaced are farmers and shepherds forced to flee with their livestock. This shepherd left Nakura in southern Lebanon on foot with his entire herd, reaching Beirut after 3 days. He is now heading to the Bekaa Valley, a journey that could take another week. Among those on the move again are Syrian refugees. For over a decade, many fled war at home and rebuilt their lives in Lebanon. Now, with violence closing in again, more than 30,000 people are making the difficult journey back to Syria. For many of these families, this is not the first time they have run. And standing on the road with everything they own, many are asking the same quiet question. Will this ever stop? Sahil Murli Meghani for South Air Network.
Thank you, Sahil. Now, the man who could be Iran's next supreme leader, a man who has never held public office, never faced a vote, but has spent decades pulling the strings from the shadows, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the assassinated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is reported to be the front runner to inherit absolute power over 90 million people, and the world is watching.
The Islamic Republic is facing the most turbulent leadership transition in its history, and one name keeps coming up: Mojtaba Khamenei. He's the second son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed during the opening phase of the US-Israeli war on Iran. Now, at 56, Mojtaba has emerged as the frontrunner to succeed his father, after years spent forging close ties with the elite revolutionary guards and building influence inside Iran's clerical establishment. He's never run for office or been subjected to a public vote, yet for decades he has been a highly influential figure in the supreme leader's inner circle, cultivating deep ties to the IRGC. The US Treasury sanctioned him in 2019, saying he represented the supreme leader in an official capacity despite never being elected or appointed to any government position. But his rise isn't without controversy. A father-to-son succession would be unprecedented in the Islamic Republic, effectively creating a dynasty reminiscent of the Pahlavi monarchy that the 1979 revolution overthrew. The IRGC has been actively pressuring the Assembly of Experts to elect him, with members describing the atmosphere as unnatural and those arguing against him given limited time to speak. Even President Trump weighed in, calling Mojtaba a lightweight and declaring his candidacy unacceptable. But analysts say if he is selected, it signals Iran's ruling elite has chosen stability over experimentation at a moment of extreme pressure. Iran's next chapter may well be written by a man who has spent his entire career working in the shadows.
And earlier, my colleague Sahin Mengani spoke with Michael Young, a senior editor at Carnegie's Middle East Institute. Let's see.
Lebanon is once again at the center of rising tensions in the Middle East as the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the United States intensifies. Israel has now carried out airstrikes on areas in and around Beirut, targeting Hezbollah positions. Lebanese authorities say over 100 people have been killed and hundreds injured, while thousands have fled their homes following evacuation warnings. Hezbollah has responded with rocket attacks into northern Israel, raising fears that Lebanon could be drawn deeper into the regional war. Joining me now, Michael Young. He's a senior editor at Carnegie's Middle Eastern Institute. Thank you so much, Michael Young, for joining us on the show today.
Well, the situation in Lebanon is very serious. In many respects, the Israelis had two intentions when they encouraged the war against Iran. They wanted to resolve their problems with Iran, but they also, at the same time, I much intended to plan some kind of operation inside Lebanon in order to, if you will, to eliminate Hezbollah, which, as you may know, 2 years ago there was a ceasefire agreement in November. But since then, the Israelis have not were not necessarily very pleased with the results of that ceasefire, and they have been arguing that Hezbollah is rearming. So I think the Israelis were looking to, excuse me, the Israelis were looking for an opportunity to try to deal once and for all with the Hezbollah problem in Lebanon. That said, it's not the Israelis in this case who were the first to fire. It's Hezbollah, which fired rockets at northern Israel on very early on Monday morning, precipitating the country into a war. So it's very serious, and I don't see this as this conflict as ending soon.
And Hezbollah is now saying that it is responding to the wider war involving Iran and Israel. To what extent is Lebanon now becoming a front line in that broader regional confrontation?
It is a front line, and it was always going to be a front line, because I think on the one hand, we have to understand that Hezbollah today is pretty much commanded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Since the party's leadership was decimated in 2024, I think the major calls, the major decisions in Hezbollah on its military front are taken by the Iranians. So Iran did want to expand the conflict, as it has throughout the region, as a way of responding to the American and Israeli assault on Iran. At the same time, I think the Israelis were waiting for an opportunity to widen the conflict to Lebanon. So the question today is, would the Israelis have attacked Lebanon had Hezbollah not fired rockets at Israel? Perhaps the answer is no. I don't know, but I think that both sides, in a way, have entered into a conflict for reasons of their own. The Hezbollah has entered it because the Iranians want them to. The Israelis were waiting for an opportunity to, as I said, continue the operation now that they had begun in 2024. So both parties were primed for a major escalation.
And the size of this displacement, we are told that the size of the displaced populations is somewhat equivalent to the area of the entire New York territory. Now, further strikes, as far as further strikes are concerned, what impact could this have on Lebanon's already fragile political and economic situation?
But it's a disaster for Lebanon. Yesterday alone, the evacuation of the southern suburbs of Beirut meant that hundreds of thousands of people were forced to leave the southern suburbs and to head to other parts of Lebanon. Lebanon is mixed in ethno-religious terms, in terms of religious communities. So a lot of these people have to find a place where they will be welcomed, and that's unfortunately the country is divided. Many people are afraid of receiving the displaced from the Shia community because they're afraid that some of these people may have ties to Hezbollah, and therefore that the Israelis would then target them in the areas of refuge where they've moved to. And this is creating a major problem because many of the displaced have nowhere to go. And people are reluctant to receive them, as I said, because they're scared that Israel will attack them there. So we have a major humanitarian problem. And that's not even mentioning the south of the country where south of the Litani, the Israelis have asked the Lebanese to move north. You have to understand the south of the Litani, you have one of Lebanon's major cities, the city of Tyre. So they've essentially emptied everything south of the Litani, including a major city.
And there were explosions in Tyre as well. I also would like to take your quick comment on what's happening with regards to Syrian refugees. Close to 30,000 Syrians had made Lebanese their safe home after what happened in Syria, and now they are forced to go back. Is that worrying as well?
No, I mean, it was more than 30,000. We had really 2 million Syrians in Lebanon. Today, I think the figures I read today are that 50,000 had returned to Syria. It's not worrying for Lebanon. On the contrary, this was a major problem for Lebanon in terms of our infrastructure. So if Syrians go back to Syria, this is not a bad thing necessarily for Lebanon. We're a country that doesn't have the capacity to sustain these large communities.
I meant for Syrian refugees. For those Syrian refugees, are you worried about their safety now?
No, I mean they're going there today. They can go back to Syria. They are not going to be arrested by the new regime in Syria. The problem was when the Assad regime was in power, but today you have a regime that is not one that the refugees oppose. The reason many refugees have not gone back to Syria is primarily economic reasons. But today, if they're going back, I don't think that their life is threatened in any way.
Thank you so much, Michael, for helping us make sense of those developments. It's a developing story. It's a tragedy that continues to unfold.
Yeah, so difficult situation even for those that are heading back maybe to their home countries, but of course facing a completely different situation from what they did years before when they were originally there. Now, let's talk about this. Earlier this week, U.S. First Lady Melania Trump chaired a meeting at the UN on the protection of children in conflict zones. But critics say her message contradicts the U.S. military action in Iran. My colleague Sarah Gill explains.
First Lady Melania Trump chaired a meeting at the United Nations on a topic few of us can argue with: the protection of children in conflict zones. And it's not necessarily that her comments were particularly controversial, it's just the general disconnect.
The US stands with all of the children throughout the world. I hope soon peace will be yours.
The irony is that US weapons have fueled historically and currently some of the world's worst wars, namely Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip that has killed more than 20,000 Palestinian children. And the First Lady's comments come just days after a joint US and Israeli mission on Iran that hit a girls' school in the city of Manab. This is the exact type of destruction that the US says it's working so hard to prevent. And while Melania Trump didn't specifically make reference to Iran or Gaza, her comments just generally feed into this rhetoric of the US being a universal savior. And it's not a new playbook. All we need to do is go back 25 years to another First Lady.
Civilized people throughout the world are speaking out in horror, not only because our hearts break for the women and children in Afghanistan, but also because in Afghanistan, we see the world the terrorists would like to impose on the rest of us.
The same civilized people that abruptly left Afghanistan in 2021, where arguably the situation for women and girls today is much worse than before American boots were on the ground there. This is a pattern that has long been documented by scholars. Academic Miriam Cook calls it the war story, the official narrative as to why a state goes to war. In this case, although the US does seem to change it every other day at the moment, but in this case, Donald Trump is saying that the US has gone to war to support Israel, to neutralize the threat of supposed nuclear weapons in Iran. And now the US president has called upon the Iranian people themselves to, quote, seize the moment.
To be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you.
Is America really backing the Iranian people? Because the footage coming out of Iran right now is one of sheer destruction. A girls' school has been reduced to rubble. Hospitals have been targeted, and thousands are fleeing Iran through the Turkish border. When America says it is about liberating Iranian people, but at the same time attacks them, it really is worth questioning if America is actually concerned with their liberation at all.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for bringing this question to so many. Now, as the U.S. aggression in the region intensifies with President Donald Trump saying the destruction of Iran is, quote, ahead of schedule, world leaders are weighing in to varying degrees. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, has emerged as one of the most vocal critics of the U.S.-Israeli military war on Iran. He has called the strikes unilateral and dangerous. He has also refused to allow U.S. forces to use Spanish bases for operations against Iran. His government says it feels let down by other European leaders, many of whom have called for restraint, but stopped shortly of directly criticizing the strikes. Now, let's see exactly what's going on. On one side, we've got Spain saying no to war, basically. And on the other side, we've got those calls for diplomacy from the UN, France deploying carriers to certain areas, the European Union boosting its defense, Russia watching closely, and Finland chiming in about the war expanding. Australia is calling for de-escalation, and Canada standing with allies. But let's listen to what these world leaders are saying.
Conflict, like many others, like every other conflict, let's be clear, the Secretary General is not the one with his finger on the trigger, right? He will continue to push for diplomacy, a return to negotiation, a respect for international law, and trying to convince enough countries to move in that direction.
Las potencias involucradas en este conflicto deben cesar inmediatamente las hostilidades y apostar por el diálogo y la diplomacia. Y los demás debemos actuar con coherencia.
Face à cette situation instable, aux incertitudes des jours à venir, j'ai donné ordre que le porte-avions Charles de Gaulle, ses moyens aériens, son escorte de frégates fassent route vers la Méditerranée.
And now it's very clear that after Iranian crisis, if we can call it so, it became even more urgent for us in Europe to ramp up production of air defense and anti-ballistic missiles. Because Americans really will not be able to provide enough of those missiles, both for the Gulf countries, for American army itself, and also for Ukrainian needs.
Обращений со стороны иранской стороны не было. Наша последовательная позиция хорошо всем известна. И здесь нет никаких изменений.
No one knows what the future holds for Iran. Usually regimes crumble from the inside, not the outside. Tehran has been considerably weakened, and there is a chance for the Iranian people to determine their own future.
In the Middle East, the events have taken rapid turns. We're now witnessing a regional escalation with countries who were pushing for diplomatic solutions.
I think the world wants to see a de-escalation and wants to see Iran cease to spread the destinations of its attacks. We're seeing Gulf states that have not been involved attacked across the board.
You've asked a fundamental hypothetical in a conflict that can spread very broadly. Today's events, recent events, point to that. So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
And these reactions show just how divided the international response has become. And beyond the military escalation, there is another question now looming over the conflict: the future of Iran itself, and who could lead the country next as pressure mounts on its current leadership. For more on this geopolitical implications, of course, we have many questions and what this moment could mean for Iran's political future. We're joined now by Sami Nader, director of the Political Science Institute at St. Joseph University of Beirut. Professor Nader, thank you for being here with us at South Air Network. With international leaders divided on how to respond to the situation, what role can diplomacy play in preventing this war from escalating even further?
I mean, I think the room for diplomacy has been shrinking, and the time actually is over. I mean, as the American president said it, the time for reaching a deal through diplomatic means is over. And despite the fact that today no diplomatic initiative has been on the international scene, with the exception maybe of like Germany is trying to open a channel of negotiation with Iran, but so far now it's the game is or the stake are in the battle in that sense, and it will depend on the outcome of this war. What will be what this war will how it will end up, and what will be the balance of power at the end.
Yeah, now I know you mentioned Germany as well, but Spain has been very vocal. But most European leaders have stopped short of directly criticizing the strikes themselves. Why has Europe been so reluctant to take a clear position on this war?
Thank you for the question. It's very interesting because, first of all, I mean, Europe is divided. Spain was not welcome, namely by Washington, as a neutral broker or a credible broker because because of its past position criticizing the Trump administration, and because as well of the very fraught relationship between Europe and the Trump administration. We have seen what happened in Munich 1 year ago. A national defense strategy was issued by American, how critical was towards Europe that were always considered as allies. And today the tone is different. Thirdly, because Europe has lost a lot of ground and a lot of clout in the Middle East as well. It has no leverage anymore, and it did not manage to build up a defense strategy, a European army. All of these factors altogether shows that Europe has lost a lot of relevance. Even at the humanitarian level, at the diplomatic level, it was not effective in primary conflicts like the one that in Syria and even in Lebanon. France has lost a major role it used to have, and we're not anymore in the Sykes-Picot era. And what we will be witnessing, I think, very soon is a new Sykes-Picot, a new line in the sand that will draw the areas of influence among the major power. And we were witnessing the comeback of regional power at the expense of the old colonial power, which used to be European powers.
Yeah, now mentioning this new line and this new power that you mentioned, what are you speaking of exactly? Can you zone in on that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, speaking of that new line and the power shifting basically from the colonial aspect that you just mentioned, in your opinion. So what are we looking at now as far as new powers?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think here we have like two different visions among the very allies. I mean, it's no secret anymore what Israel has in mind is to strike a partnership not with the states but with ethnic groups and players in the region, whether there are Kurds or whether there are other faction in Libya, in Somalia, and even in Yemen. They struck alliances with players and on the ground and not with states. I do believe that the American approach is quite different, and we have seen it. We have seen it in Iran today. That Mr. Trump, the President Trump, is favoring a deal with the regime, but a new regime keeping the structure of the state as is, but changing the direction.
And only time will tell, right? Only time will tell. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us here at South Air Network, for shedding light on the complexities of this conflict, and of course helping us understand what it could mean for Iran and for the entire region. Now, for decades, Dubai sold the world one thing above all else: safety. This week, Iranian missiles made that promise very hard to keep. While sirens wailed over the Palm and smoke rose above the skyline, the influencers kept posting rooftop pools, reassuring stories, and reassuring that business is as usual in the area. But behind the carefully curated feeds, the ultra-wealthy were already in convoys heading for the borders. Here's a story behind the filters.
For years, Dubai sold a dream: sun, safety, tax-free lifestyle that looks good in a 60-second reel. It became the playground of billionaires, influencers, and the global ultra-wealthy, a gleaming city-state that prided itself on being the one place in a volatile region where nothing bad ever happened. That promise shattered on the evening of February 28th. As U.S. and Israeli forces struck Iran, the Gulf became a firing range. Iranian missiles and drones didn't just target military infrastructure, but also struck the iconic Palm Jumeirah, licked the facade of the Burj Al Arab, damaged Dubai International Airport, and forced the brief evacuation of the Burj Khalifa. Air raid sirens wailed over neighborhoods where, just hours earlier, the biggest concern was valet parking. And yet within hours, the content kept coming. Influencers posted from rooftop pools. Socialite Hofet Golan assured her followers the city still feels like a very safe place. Hours after a missile hit a hotel on the Palm, the beaches were empty, the highways eerily silent, but the feed told a different story. The Dubai brand didn't pause. It doubled down. Meanwhile, behind the filters, the reality was something else. For the ordinary traveler, the reality was an airport floor and a canceled flight. According to Semaphore, private security firms booked entire fleets of SUVs to ferry wealthy clients on the 10-hour desert drive to Riyadh, one of the few functional airports. From there, private jets to Europe were selling for up to $350,000. Those being evacuated included senior finance executives and high-net-worth individuals who had been in the region for business or pleasure. One expert summed it up: this is Dubai's ultimate nightmare, as its very essence depended on being a safe oasis in a troubled region. The reels keep rolling, but behind the carefully curated feeds, the wealthy are in convoys heading for the borders. The safe haven is still standing. The feeling of invincibility, that's buried in the sand.
Thank you, Muna. And while Dubai struggled to maintain an image of calmness, the impact of the conflict is far from confined to luxury skylines. Across the region and across the globe, the war between U.S., Israel, and Iran is already hitting everyone's wallets. Shabnam Nasimi reports on 5 ways this conflict could affect fuel prices, food, energy bills, and global economies, no matter where you live.
The United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran last weekend. This war started in the Middle East, but its consequences are coming for all of us. Here's what you need to know. First up, fuel. The Strait of Hormuz carries 1/5 of all the oil the world consumes. It has effectively shut down. Brent crude has already surged 13% in under a week, and analysts at the Bank of America warn that it could break $100 a barrel if it stays closed. China, India, Japan, and South Korea get nearly 70% of their oil through the strait. Across Asia, Goldman Sachs says that even a 6-week closure could put inflation up by 0.7%. And Qatar's energy minister has just warned that war in the Middle East could bring down the economies of the world, predicting that all Gulf energy exporters would shut down production within weeks and drive oil to $150 a barrel. Second, and this is one that could hurt most, food. The Middle East is a critical supplier of fertilizer, and with the Strait of Hormuz blocked and Qatar Energy halting production following military strikes on its facilities, global fertilizer production has already jumped 21% in a single week. For farmers across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America who depend on imported fertilizer, this is devastating. Higher fertilizer costs mean lower crop yields or higher food prices. And this is happening in regions where food insecurity is already severe. Third, energy. Global gas markets are interconnected. When prices spike in one part of the world, they spike everywhere. UK gas prices nearly doubled in less than a week. For nations in the global south that have limited energy subsidies and no price cap protection, rising gas feeds directly into electricity prices, cooking fuel costs, and industrial energy, squeezing households and small businesses with no buffer. Fourth, shipping. Think of the Strait of Hormuz as a highway, not for cars, but for the world's oil and goods. Around 1/5 of everything the world trades passes through that single stretch of water between Iran and Oman. Right now, that highway is closed. Around 200 tankers are stranded. Ships that were moving are now sitting still. And when ships stop moving, the cost of moving anything, oil, medicine, food, machinery, goes up. The IMF says that these price rises take around 12 months to fully show up in shops and markets. That means the spikes we're seeing today won't reach your local market until early 2027. But it is coming. And finally, the big picture. For the past 2 years, the cost of living had been coming down across most of the world. People were starting to breathe again. But when oil, food, and energy all get more expensive at the same time, that relief disappears fast. And here's where it gets really serious. When prices rise, the US Federal Reserve, America's central bank, puts up interest rates to try to control it. That sounds technical, but here's what it means in practice. It makes the US dollar stronger, and when the dollar gets stronger, poorer countries who borrowed money in dollars suddenly owe a lot more. Their debt becomes harder to pay off. We saw exactly this happen in 2022 when Sri Lanka ran out of money entirely, Zambia defaulted on its loans. ordinary people lost savings, jobs, and access to basic goods, not because of anything their own governments did, but because of a chain of reactions that started thousands of miles away. That chain of reaction is starting again. This conflict may have started in the Middle East, but its economic shockwaves will be felt everywhere.
Thank you for that thorough explanation, Shabnam. Now, from the global economic ripple effects of war, we shift to Nepal, where a very different kind of revolution is taking shape. Voters in Nepal have sent a clear signal of change in yesterday's historic election. Balendra Shah, the rapper who became the face of last year's Gen Z uprising, is emerging as a major force against the old political guard. His Rastriya Swatantra party is leading in over 90 seats, while his rivals struggle to reach single digits. Shah himself is winning in Japa 5, taking on former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli directly. Just 6 months ago, 77 people died in the streets demanding change. Yesterday, with a 60% turnout, Nepal's voters spoke loudly at the ballot box. Early trends are clear, but of course, full official results are not expected until March 12th. And while Nepal shakes up its political landscape, we're going to be updating you on that. Let's take a step back and look at what else is happening around the world. Pop icon Britney Spears was arrested Wednesday night in Ventura County on suspicion of driving under the influence. California Highway Patrol pulled over her black BMW after reports of erratic driving on the freeway. She failed a field sobriety test and was booked at around 3 a.m., but has since been released. She is scheduled to appear in court on May 4th. Now, her representative called it an unfortunate incident that is completely inexcusable. And 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton has called on African leaders to unite and reclaim the continent. Speaking to media in Melbourne ahead of this week's Australian Grand Prix, Hamilton said he wants to see Africa taken back from the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the British. He also pledged not to retire until Formula One returns to Africa, where it hasn't raced since 1993. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has warned that the post-war global architecture is breaking down and called on middle powers to write the new rules of international order. Addressing the Australian Parliament precisely in Canberra, Carney said countries must decide whether they write the new rules or let the hegemons dictate outcomes. What do you think about that? And of course, we have more in sports. South Asia's pride is on full display with India. They've secured their spot in the ICC Men's T20 World Cup final after a thrilling 7-run victory over England in Mumbai. Sanju Samson's explosive 89 helped India post 253, and despite a century from Jacob Bethel, England fell just short. Now, India will take on New Zealand in Sunday's final in Ahmedabad, chasing a world record, third T20 World Cup title. We'll see if that is possible, with the region's hopes resting solely on the defending champions. And from the world of soccer, of course, we have more news from the global star Lionel Messi. He's facing social media backlash after appearing at a White House event hosted by U.S. President Donald Trump. The Inter Miami captain attended a ceremony honoring the club's Major League Soccer title win and was seen applauding, and this as Trump was speaking about the war with Iran. The appearance has sparked criticism online, with some fans saying the 8-time Ballon d'Or winner was being drawn into politics and showing apathy, while others were just making fun memes and poking fun at the many faces Messi was making throughout the event. And of course, to finish things off on an exciting note for many, BTS is back, and the internet is not okay. A lot of us are not okay. Netflix just dropped the official trailer for BTS The Comeback. This is a live experience, and it has already exploded with hundreds of thousands of views and emotional fan reactions. All 7 members, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook, of course, are back together, delivering one message to their fans: we kept our promise, and they did. The full reunion concert streams on Netflix March 21st, their first full group performance since 2022, and a behind-the-scenes documentary, BTS The Return, is going to be dropping on March 27. One fan said it best online: All 7 members together making more noise than the Grammys. We are so back, and I couldn't agree more. For millions of the Army, the BTS Army, who waited through years of military service, this week feels like coming back home. And of course, that's a wrap for tonight. Thank you so much for being here with us, from high-stakes politics and global conflicts to historic elections and sports victories. And of course, finally, a heartfelt moment for fans around the world. Tonight's stories remind us of just how much power there is in resilience, promises kept, and hope. I'm Leticia Castro. Thank you for joining us here at the South Era Report. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.